Welcome back, everyone, to Open Line, talking politics. Politics right here before Thanksgiving. Happy to have with us Dr. Thomas Schwartz, professor of history and political science at Vanderbilt. We talked about impeachment. We talked about the Democratic race broadly. Let's talk about Mayor Pete Buttigieg. How surprising is it that he's doing as well as he's doing? And I guess quantify how well he is doing.
Well, he's done very well fundraising. He is the first openly gay candidate to run for president. And in a way, he is trying to do something of an Obama as a pathbreaker. He's extraordinarily articulate. He's moved into a little bit of the moderate lane in the Democratic primaries by being critical of some of the proposals by Senator Warren and Senator Sanders, for example, Medicare for all, and some of these ideas, basically saying we have to be more cautious in implementing reforms that deal with 1/5 of the economy and things like that. He's had great fundraising. And what we've seen is that he's pulled out into the lead in Iowa. And one of the more recent polls had him with 25% of the vote and a 7 to 8 point lead over his nearest rival, which was a real shock, I think. The thing is, he went at the debate. He thought he would be more strongly attacked at the debate, but he really, the other candidates did not decide to go after him, which led some people to think that people still don't think he's really the front runner, that they think that this is something of a phenomenon and that they're not prepared yet to see him as a genuine threat. And Joe Biden hasn't gone after him or anything either. What has appeared, and what will probably become more common, are articles attacking his role as mayor of South Bend. South Bend is only a relatively small city in Indiana. It has a relatively high crime rate. Mayor Pete has had some problems dealing with the African American community over many of these issues. So there is a lot of concern that about how well he could reassemble the Obama coalition, which is obviously the critical thing if you're going to win. But he certainly, as a 37-year-old, just 2 years older than the Constitution's limit, he's really had an extraordinary rise.
It's very interesting to see in the debates the kind of battle within the Democratic Party, because that's what this nominating process is, and I guess that's what it should be, and that's kind of healthy. But we have some, in the Democratic Party, there are some very, I guess, liberal people running, and then more moderate. You said Buttigieg and I guess Biden are trying to be more moderate, and Bloomberg wants to come in there.
That's right.
And so it's really a battle for what is the party going to be about. Is that a fair statement?
I think so. I think it's also a battle for as the party recognizes how to win. None of these ideas can be implemented unless you win the election. And there is this division within the Democrats about how best to win. And there is the one group that sees it as necessary to turn their voters out, and they think they need a more bold proclamation, the Sanders-Warren, that if you're bold, you'll turn out more voters, and that's the way to win. And then there's the more moderate, there's the Biden, Buttigieg, others saying, no, the key is going to be turning some of those voters who have voted for Obama and then Trump, turning them back to the Democrats. Some of the more conservative or moderate voters in the Midwest, and particularly the Rust Belt states, trying to get those in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, those states that let Trump win. So in that sense, there's a belief that if the party tones down some of the more dramatic changes, that it can win those voters back simply because those Democrats don't like Trump, and they would vote for a Democrat if they don't think it's going to be as radical a change.
There's some Democrats who think young people won't get excited about a moderate candidate.
Right. Yeah.
And that if you want the Obama coalition, who had a lot of young people and excitement, you need, I guess, a more liberal candidate. Yeah. Historically speaking, because you're a professor of history and political science, what's the answer? Or do we, obviously we don't know, we're forging new things here, but in your opinion, based on all that you have studied, looking at everything in the past, is it right that they need a bold sort of change or to get young people, or is it right to go after the Midwestern vote that maybe they didn't do so well with last time?
Well, it may be my age showing, but what reminds me that this idea of the enthusiasm issue reminds me a bit of the McGovern campaign against Nixon. 18-year-olds got the right to vote in 1971, and there was this belief that with 18-year-olds having the right to vote, the Vietnam War is still going on, that you could turn out this youth vote, and that this would be, you needed an exciting candidate, someone who was anti-war and quite bold in their proclamations to win. And the Republicans went to a landslide. Now, I don't think that would be the case this time. I think under almost any circumstance, I think 2020 will be a tightly fought election. But I do have some issues with the idea of relying on the youth vote. What most analysis shows is that younger people tend not to vote in the sort of numbers of older people. It's to some extent, voting is an age-acquired skill that after a certain amount of time you tend to vote more, and that the percentage of younger people who vote is never as high. And there's reasons for that. Younger people have other things in their lives, all the rest of that, and they're not as interested in some of these political issues. And it is possible that the Democrats have an argument if they could excite them, and particularly on issues like college loans, forgiveness of loans, or medical care, that they could turn out more of these voters. And given how close the election is, it may be that it would hold in a few states or whatever. I guess I would probably come down 60-40 more toward the idea that you need a more moderate candidate to beat Trump rather than a strict and progressive. And
maybe that's why we've seen two people get in who would go down that
Absolutely,
road.
Sure.
And they're worried Democrats are going too far to the left. Yeah, that's a fascinating argument. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think? Who do you think the best candidate would be, and why? Do they have a chance to beat President Trump? If they do, again, who is the best one? Who's best suited, in your opinion, to do that? I think it's an interesting conversation, and one that I'm sure people will have around their Thanksgiving dinner table. And then the other is impeachment, and we talked about that at the top. But the polls for impeachment, you said they're pretty well split right now, right? It's like everything, I feel like.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't know how that is. Why is it everything is always split? But you said the latest one was 50-45, something like that.
The CNN one today.
How closely are Democrats watching that for their cues for what they're going to do going forward? Do you think it's about principle, or are they going to watch the polls like hawks?
Well, if you asked a Democratic congressman, he'd say, of course it's about principle, and I understand that, but they're watching the polls. I mean, I think there is, the interesting thing is early on, there was some polling that showed that even a substantial number of Republicans and independents thought that asking for an investigation of a political rival with a foreign power was wrong, and that should not be done. And so I think there was more support for, you might say, a censure of the president rather than the full-scale impeachment at the time, and that they might have built on that. In the end, they, of course, did have these hearings, which have shown some serious questions about what the president was up to in Ukraine, and have raised some serious doubts about the style of the Trump foreign policy. That said, it doesn't seem to have moved the needle with Republicans on this. And Nancy Pelosi did say at one point that she thought impeachment in the end had to be bipartisan. It's not going to be. The question that comes back to me is, well, why not do something else? But I guess I do think the Democrats may feel they're so locked into this for their base and for others that they feel they have to go ahead with impeachment, even if they are very certain, 99%, that the Republicans are not going to vote for it in the Senate.
And it's so interesting to me how people can see the same set of facts and look at them so differently. And I guess we can't even, of course, we've talked about it, you can't even decide what facts are. But it's just, it's fascinating to me. And someone explained it to me that President Trump was elected to thumb his nose, and maybe other things, to thumb his nose at Washington, D.C. And so he can go and do things that other presidents probably couldn't do.
True.
And people who voted for him just kind of aren't going to focus too much on that. The fact that everyone's all upset just kind of makes them go, oh, he's doing what I wanted him to do.
Well,
is that kind of, what do you think about
I think that has a lot of validity. I think the real issue in my mind is that he has so far followed through on what he did say was the most important thing, namely that the country, the stock market is at all-time highs, unemployment is very low, the economy is still functioning. This was why I did think that if there were any real bump on the economic news before the election. That would be much more damaging to him than anything else that he might do.
Let's go to Lucy. Lucy, thank you for calling in, Lucy.
Well, hey, y'all.
Well, hey, what's on your mind, Lucy?
Well, y'all always say Democrat, Republican. You never include us independents out here. So I'm a little bit offended by that.
Okay,
and
good.
I've got several decades as an independent. So let's rip here, okay?
All right.
First, let's see, where shall we start? Y'all started with impeachment. I think that Donald Trump, he's running out of time because Kim Kardashian has not finished her law degree, and my guess is he's going to appoint her to the Supreme Court so she can pardon him once he does. He's not going to get impeached, I don't think. But what I would like to see is Donald Trump not impeached. I want to see him locked up. And there's funny things going on with the stock market. He makes these veiled threats that the stock market's going to crash. And he's got associates. I think one guy's name is Felix or something, that was part of a real big pump and dump stock scheme, on the stock market. So, I keep hearing my older friends saying there's something that's not right about the stock market. It's just there's no reason for it to be doing what it's doing. So anyway, we'll see how that works out.
Okay.
But as far as candidates, I've tried to keep up with the debates and whatnot. In some of the interviews on TV, it's just kind of hard to do when the Republicans started this trend of 17 candidates and all that stuff about 10 years ago. It was hard to keep up with that. Now it's hard to keep up with the Democrats.
Right.
But if I looked at some candidates, I would look at something like a cross between maybe Klobuchar and Warren. Warren, I think, is an extremely intelligent woman. She's been on top of these issues for years that she talks about. She may have misspoke, saying Medicare for all, wrong terminology. But I'm a conservative. I'm a fiscal conservative. I am a social conservative. And I think people need to really find out what their terms are. Liberal, I've been accused of being anywhere from a liberal to a hardcore redneck. It depends on who's looking at me on what given day.
Okay.
Because I don't follow a rut. So I want to say something about this. People call him Mayor Pete. I think he is an intelligent guy. I think he's first generation America. I think he came from his heritage is from the Isle of Malta. A lot of those people over there aren't ignorant. So he comes from a culture, maybe his parents really stimulated his brain. Maybe he's too nerdy for most people. South Bend, Indiana has always been crime-ridden. It's a Rust Belt town. You can't hang that on Pete. But I want to say this about that guy. We have an East Tennessee politician here that said we have a queer running for president. I'll say this about Buttigieg. At least he's out in his homosexuality, and he's not hiding behind some woman's skirt with 5 kids and pulls his wig off when he becomes governor and say, hey, I think I've decided to tell y'all I'm gay, or an evangelist to say, hey, you know what, I picked up male prostitutes.
All right, okay.
This man is who he is, and I have to respect him for that. So
Lucy,
that's all
thank
I want
you.
to say about that.
That's great. I appreciate everything you said. So there's a lot to digest there, but she's kind of just going over everything we talked about. So, all right, Lucy, let's go to Kevin. Hello, Kevin. Kevin, are you there?
Oh, yeah. Hey, Dan, how you doing? I'm a big, me, I'm a big fan of Channel 5.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for calling in, Kevin.
Yeah. Well, not that I don't like Trump, Dan. I don't know. I just think he's not all that friendly. He's kind of... not that I don't have anything against him, but I don't know. I don't know much. I just know a lot of people complain about him.
A lot of people do complain about him. And I don't think people elected him to be friendly, right? I mean, that's not, I don't know. That's not what his supporters sent him up there to be. But he doesn't, I don't think that's the first thing people would think is friendly. But Kevin, thank you for that call. Lucy, thank you for your call. Jack, hold on. We're going to take a break. We'll come back and take more calls. If you want to call in, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. We'll be back right after this.